Let's take a look at Game 7 of the World Championship match between Magnus Carlsen and Fabiano Caruana. In Game 7, Carlsen had the white pieces, so this is his second white in a row. Could he make anything of it? Well, of course, he narrowly survived in Game 6, so that wasn't a success. He's gone back to playing d4 and solid Queen's Gambit declined, and this Bishop f4 variation that we saw in Game 2. Now, who's going to produce the first surprise in this position? Well, in fact, it was Carlsen who varied. Now, this is a very old main line of the opening. Queen a5, and here Carlsen in Game 2 played Rook d1, which was met by Rook d8. Castle's queenside is a very theoretical move here, but has kind of been analysed out. And in this game, Carlsen reverted to knight d2, which was kind of the established move some time ago. So he's obviously found some new idea. And here bishop e7 is normal. And that's been played in hundreds of games, actually. But here Caruana retreated the queen to d8. Now that is a little bit unusual. Now of course it makes sense to avoid knight b3. But going back and forth like this, well, you know, what's the logic of that? Well, the logic is that white has retreated the knight from its best square f3. So this knight is going to have to redeploy. So in a sense, black isn't losing time. It's interesting, but it hasn't been played much before. But Caruana was clearly very well prepared for this line, and it threw Magnus a little bit. He started using up quite a bit of time. Now maybe the critical moves in this position are either Castle's queenside or simply Rook to d1. But Carlsen played knight b3, and instead of bishop e7, Caruana played the bishop back to b6. So this is one of the ideas of queen d8, that the bishop doesn't have to go back to this slightly a little bit passive square e7. Instead goes to b6, which leaves the e7 square available for black's queen. It's very important to connect rooks in this kind of position. And this will help ease the congestion in black's position. Again, Rook d1 is probably the most testing move, but bishop e2 from Carlsen, he's playing really quite conservatively. And queen e7, that's a nice square for the queen. So preparing bishop d7 and connecting rooks, very important. Bishop g5. Okay, now we see Carlsen's idea that because the bishop has come round over here, then he's looking to perhaps exploit the pin on this diagonal. Now Caruana had a 29-minute think at this moment, and I'm not surprised actually, because I think he realised during the game that if he gets it right, he could simply equalise quite quickly. If he gets it wrong, he could be suffering for a long time positionally with a slightly disadvantageous position. So he took on c4. And now bishop takes pawn doesn't get white anywhere. The bishop isn't particularly well placed on c4. You can see it's just blunted by the pawn here. So knight d2. So the knight also comes back to a better square. It's going to come here and take the pawn on c4. Or maybe come to e4 as well. Knight e5 from Caruana. And this is a really important moment in the game. Move 14. Who'd have thought it? I mean, both players thought that this was maybe the one moment in the game that Carlsen had to try and unbalance the position in a kind of sensible way, if you see what I mean. They were both considering knight ce4. So putting some pressure here. So leaving this pawn for the time being. Now black has nothing better than to play bishop d7. And here queen c3. I saw someone was suggesting knight takes and bishop here. What about this? In fact, this doesn't really damage black's kingside very much. I think the problem is it's not really easy to bring the queen over in any sensible way. Black's king is fine here. And, well, for instance, after this, okay, there are slight problems with recapturing this pawn. I mean, if there's ever any danger of the king, you can play f5 or retreat the knight to g6 or king to h8. And don't forget that bishop coming to c6. And then, well, in combination with a king g8 and perhaps a queen coming over or a rook coming to the g file, well, whose king is under fire? So no, I'm afraid in that position, knight takes f6 would definitely rebound on white. But queen c3 is the testing move, as both players discussed after the game. Now, some tactics. Knight is threatened, and be careful because there's some threats here. So knight takes knight. White should recapture. If bishop takes, then knight takes here is fine for black. So knight takes, and now this is on prise and this is on prise, so f6. And queen takes knight. Okay, tricky position. Now after the game, well, obviously, first of all, pawn takes queen, bishop takes queen, so that's no problem. After the game, the players were discussing this position in the press conference, and Caruana thought that this was a likely continuation. And h6, and they both weren't sure about this position. Carlsen was worried about the two bishops, I think very understandably. Both bishops could potentially be extremely strong in this position. But Carlsen also said, well, you know, if I can somehow consolidate, then, you know, this pawn doesn't look great. I think Carlsen's judgment was actually correct. I think this is quite risky for white. And in fact, if we just go back a move, there's a very computery move in this position. Black doesn't actually have to take the bishop straight away, but instead can play bishop c6. Yeah, that's a very tricky computer move. So just positioning the bishop on a very nice diagonal before recapturing the material. So, for example, I mean, black could well be playing this move at some moment anyway. If knight takes... So material is actually even at this moment. If pawn takes, then bishop takes queen, but black doesn't need to do that. I mean, it's a slightly unusual position. But with these beautiful bishops, and potential to attack on the g file, maybe by swinging the queen or the rook over, then I think white has to be very, very careful in this position. So I think, although, you know, Carlsen said, well, you know, that was my one chance to go for it, but he clearly wasn't comfortable, and I think his judgment was absolutely correct. He said that after he castled, this was kind of an admission that he had nothing in the position and it's basically equal. And indeed, Caruana succeeded in developing his queenside. And it's one of those typical Queen's Gambit positions where there are just open C and D files. And that means lots of exchanges, the rooks come off very easily, the bishop has reached its dream square, and white sometimes has to be a little bit careful in these kind of positions when the bishop is stationed on c6. Of course, Carlsen appreciated any danger in this position very well. Lots of exchanges. And this was Carlsen's one last try. It's an interesting idea, actually. He almost got a little something here. I mean, I was actually expecting Fabiano to play bishop e4 in this position. There's a funny move. If bishop takes bishop, then we have this typical drawing mechanism with the check on the h file. And then back again here. White doesn't have to take bishop e2 as possible. But then queen c7, well, black is also fine here. But Caruana wasn't perturbed by this bishop move and simply played b6. f3 blunts that bishop, that's important. Bishop b7, so Caruana is just holding firm here. But it does allow bishop takes knight, and I thought this might give Magnus just a slight chance. I mean, that's what he's aiming for, that this knight is a superior minor piece to the bishop, now that it's blunted by these pawns. But in fact, there are no real weaknesses in black's position, and Caruana defended very easily. So this is the game continuation that basically forces a queen exchange. And the knight is very impressive on d6. But black's king comes into the middle very easily. And white has a slight problem with that pawn on g2. White's king dashes to the middle before black can come in here. And here's the problem. If that pawn were on h2, well, there might be a slim chance of getting somewhere. But here the bishop is attacking the pawn, and Carlsen just brought the king back to defend. And they repeated the position. And here Caruana declared that after bishop a6 the position would be repeated 3 times, and therefore a draw, which Carlsen of course didn't protest about. So draw agreed after 40 moves, 7 draws in a row, same as the Carlsen-Karyakin match, and then we had a decisive game in game 8. So let's see. I mean, this is a very, very tense contest, and the players are extremely evenly matched. Carlsen said after the game he wasn't really thrilled with his play in this game, but still, the match is still even and there's all to play for. But with 5 games to go, Caruana has 3 whites compared to Carlsen's 2 whites. So is that advantage to the challenger? Let's see. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you're not a subscriber, then do click on the subscribe button. And if you'd like to support us, check out patreon.com PowerPlayChess, or if you want to make a one-off donation, then do hit the PayPal button up there. Thanks for watching.